Okay, so if you've seen my other videos, you've probably seen that I recommend a high carb, low fat vegan diet to cure depersonalization, anxiety, and depression. And, this also helps other mental health disorders. And now a lot of people ask me, how does this actually work? Why in the world would eating more carbohydrates help cure a mental illness? Doesn't make any sense. What are you talking about, George? You're crazy. So in this video, I'm going to try to explain why the high carb, low fat vegan diet is the most optimized way to cure these mental health these mental health disorders, or these mental disorders. Okay, so where can I start? First off, let's just start with this. And you can go, everything I'm going to say, you can go ahead and Google it so that you can get verification on what I'm talking about. Um, First off, every cell in the human body uses glucose, which is sugar, as fuel. Every single cell, your eye cells, your brain cells, your skin cells, your organ cells, your muscle cells, they all use glucose as fuel. Now, okay, cool. So every cell in the human body uses sugar as fuel. So what? Well, the most efficient macronutrient, and for those that don't know what a macronutrient is, there are three macronutrients. There's protein, there's fats, and there's carbohydrates. All foods um, have some kind of ratio of these. Things like broccoli, have a little more protein, a little more carbs, and not a lot of fat. Bananas have a lot of carbs, not too much protein, not too much fat. So there's like varying degrees of this for each food, but most foods have these three macronutrients in them. And for context, 1 gram of carbohydrate is 4 calories, 1 gram of protein is 4 calories, and 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. Okay, so these are the macronutrients that humans consume. And the macronutrient out of these three that most efficiently converts into glucose that can be used in your cells, all the cells in your body, the most efficient one is carbohydrates. When you eat carbohydrates, your body knows exactly what to do with them to be able to convert them quickly and efficiently into glucose so that you can fuel your cells and your body can do what it needs to do. So that's one reason why a high carb, low fat vegan diet is optimized. And then for those that don't know what optimized means, it means basically trying to make something as good as it can get. We're not just trying to skate by. It's trying to take something and make it as good as possible, so that it performs as well as it can. So, okay, carbohydrates are the best fuel source for a human body. Obviously, if you're talking about other animals like a cat, they eat different macronutrients than a human would. Cats primarily eat protein and fat as their primary fuel source, but for humans, it is carbohydrates. Okay, things like fat and protein, humans don't need too much of it to survive. And if we get an excess amount of protein and fat in our diet, bad things start to happen to us. We get things like diabetes because of too much fat in the diet, which causes insulin resistance. And now your body needs to produce more insulin to be able to get the sugar in your blood sugar, out of the blood and into the muscle cells. When there's too much fat in the diet, your body is working harder to be able to get that blood sugar out of the blood and into the cells, right? So that's why people say, well, if I do high carb, low fat vegan, am I going to get diabetes? No, you're not, because diabetes is not caused by an excess amount of carbohydrates or an excess amount of sugar. Diabetes is caused by an excess amount of fat in the diet because it causes insulin resistance, and now the body cannot efficiently get the sugar out of the blood and into the cell. So it stays in the blood, and then when you go to the doctor, he says, "Oh, you have high blood sugar." But it's not the sugar's fault. It's the fat that is messing up your insulin or your sensitivity to insulin. So we want to keep the fat real low. I promote an 80-10-10 style diet, which means 80% of the calories you get are from carbohydrates, 10% is from fat, and 10% is from protein. Now, let's go move on to protein. Protein, when consumed in excess amounts, or particularly when consumed from animal sources like milk, yogurt, cheese, meats, eggs, things like this, animal proteins are particularly bad for humans and particularly bad for people with mental health disorders. Why is that? Well, there is a process that happens in your body to create serotonin, right? And usually when you have a mental health disorder like depersonalization or anxiety or depression, you'll go to the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist will prescribe you an SSRI, and that stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So as you can hear in the name there, it's serotonin that this drug tries to increase inside of your body or inside of your brain. Now, what we're trying to do is, well, those medications cause a lot of side effects. But what we're trying to do with the diet is we're trying to optimize your chances of creating as much serotonin as you possibly can. Why are we trying to do that? Is because serotonin is it's like a shield. It's like a barrier or a buffer against stress. Everybody goes through stress. Some people go through more stress than others, but we all go through stress. Just by living our daily lives, having to go to work, having to go to school, having to deal with family and relationships, all of that taxes on our stress tolerance, our ability to tolerate a certain amount of stress. And when that stress tolerance is just too much to bear, then we start to get symptoms of DP, right? Or sometimes we reach a level where we reach a level where we kind of snap, and then we're stuck in a perpetual depersonalization 24/7. Now, I know a lot of people watching this video can understand what I'm talking about. So we were talking about protein. I'm going to give a simple overview of how protein turns into serotonin in the body. So what happens is, let's say you eat some protein from just your regular vegan foods, right? You're eating broccoli or you're eating rice, beans, potatoes, and maybe a small side of like broccoli or a salad, right? We want to focus on carbs. So rice, beans, potatoes, that's our meal. And then broccoli and salads, those are kind of like condiments. They're not the main meal. So we eat that food, and then in those foods there are proteins. And basically what our body does is it takes those proteins, they become amino acids, and in those amino acids there is an amino acid called tryptophan. Tryptophan is the precursor to serotonin. So what happens is, as you eat the carbohydrates and as you eat the proteins, the carbohydrates get your insulin going, right? And then when the insulin is in your blood, it activates a pathway from your blood to your brain. It's called the blood-brain barrier. And that insulin allows a doorway for through that. And the reason there's a doorway is so that tryptophan can go through that doorway and can enter the brain. Once it enters the brain, it turns into serotonin by another complicated process that, if you want, you can go look up. But here's what happens when we eat animal proteins. When we eat animal proteins, let's say we eat a steak along with our rice and veggies, right? So we eat the steak, but the thing is, in the steak, there is such an overwhelming amount of protein, and then that becomes an overwhelming amount of amino acids. And what happens is you still get the same process where the rice or the carbohydrates in that meal will, start up insulin. Insulin opens the doorway, but because there's so many amino acids competing for that doorway to get through, tryptophan ends up getting in the back of the line, and it's not able to enter the brain efficiently. So you'll still get some tryptophan, obviously, because if you didn't have any serotonin, you would die. But what happens is it goes to the back of the line. So we're no longer optimized for serotonin production. We're no longer optimizing our diet to be able to be as happy and be as tolerant to stress as we could be because of the animal proteins. It's not that you can't eat the animal protein, because obviously if you're watching this video, you probably already are. But what we're trying to do is trying to get you to feel as good as possible. Because if we can get you to feel as good as possible consistently over many weeks, then you're kind of doing exactly what the SSRI that your psychiatrist would prescribe you. You're doing it in a natural form. You're increasing the amount of serotonin in your brain, which is increasing that shield that I was talking about, that stress shield. And then you're able to relax. You're able to be happy. You're able to deal with stress in life that is inevitable. And so that is another reason why a high carb, low fat vegan diet is so important to recovering from severe depersonalization. Some people who haven't had it very long can get over DP on their own, but this is mostly for people that have had DP for a very long time and cannot get over DP using medications and other methods, right? These are for the severe people. What else can I talk about? We've talked about how glucose works and how carbohydrates are the best to produce glucose in the body. We've talked about serotonin and how important that is for mental health. We've talked about how an excess amount of fat can lead to diabetes. Also, an excess amount of fat is the cause of diabetes and the cause of heart disease. A lot of people also, there have been studies that an elevated amount of fat in the diet also leads to Alzheimer's, which is another brain disorder, right? And as people with DP, we're trying to get our brains to be as healthy as possible, because we know that this is kind of where the problem is occurring. But really what it is, it's a systemic problem. It's the brain and the body, because obviously we're connected. The brain and the body is connected. And so we need to treat them as if they were one thing, not as if, oh, my brain is disconnected from my body. No, they are one thing. And as we heal the body, as we strengthen the body, then the mind just follows. We don't have to go to therapy. And I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this in the comments maybe, but we don't have to go to therapy when we just focus on the three most important things: diet, high carb, low fat vegan diet, sleep, and water. If we just focus on these things and optimize them, meaning making them as good as they can possibly be, then we don't have to worry about trying not to think about it. I've gone on forums before and people say, try not to think about it. And it was so difficult for me. I was like, how do you expect me not to think about depersonalization? This shit sucks. I hate this. And it's impossible to not think about it. Or people would say go to therapy, and I did. I would go to psychiatrist, and I would feel good for like a day or 20 minutes or half an hour or an hour, and then I would get my symptoms back. When we do these three things and focus on these three things, then and do them consistently every single day for weeks, and I'm talking about 3-4 weeks, you will start to feel different. You will start to feel relief, and you'll see the light at the end of the tunnel. You'll be like, I'm onto something. I found the thing that has helped the most out of all the other things that I've tried. And the reason for that is because we're just working with how the body is designed to work. The problem is that American culture is like almost completely set up to fuck us up. American culture is like eat burgers, eat meat, eat a bunch of fat, eat a bunch of butter, work a shit ton of hours, and if you don't work, you're a lazy bastard. It's just completely set up to fuck us and to make us feel horrible. And it's no wonder why we have the highest rate of obesity. It's no wonder why so much of our population dies from diabetes and heart disease. It's no wonder why, like half the population suffers from some kind of mental disorder like depression or anxiety. It's because our culture is set up to mess us up. And it's when I try to put this information out, I get so much pushback because it's so different from what we are taught as we grow up. It's just completely different. I'm advocating for no coffee in a world where everyone drinks coffee. I'm advocating for no meat in a world or in a country where everyone eats meat. I'm advocating for no oil, no butter in a country where everyone cooks with oil, and it's inconceivable to cook with no oil or butter. So it's very different, but it freaking works. And it works because this is how the human body was designed to work. We're not supposed to eat a lot of fat. We're not supposed to eat oil at all. We don't need to eat animals, and if we do eat animals, it fucks us up. So I'm sorry I went on a rant there. It's just that I know that I always get a lot of pushback when I promote these things, but I know that they work because I've done it for myself and I've done it for other people, and it's worked for them as well. In different cultures as well. I'm Latino. I've done it for friends that are Polish, so from Europe, European descent, and also for people in Nigeria, so now African descent. This thing works for human beings. Human beings, we're all the same. We may eat different carb sources, but we all need carbs. People in Nigeria may eat a lot of corn, ugali, milipop. People in Poland may eat a lot of pasta and potato. People in Mexico may eat a lot of rice, beans, and tortillas. But the thing is, they're all different foods, but they all have the carb source. They all have that starchiness. And the key here is to cook with no oil and to eat a lot of carbs, a lot. It's going to be a very different form of eating than what you're used to. You're used to eating a small portion of a food that is very calorie dense, like meat. Meat is very calorie dense because fat is 9 calories per 1 gram of fat. When you compare that to carbohydrates, which is 4 calories per 1 gram of fat, fat is more than double the amount of calories. So you can eat half the volume, the size of the food, you can eat half the amount and get more than twice the calories. So when you're starting to go on a high carb, low fat vegan diet, you have to eat a larger volume of food. You have to eat more food. And here's the next one. People are so afraid of sugar because every single blog you read, Every podcast you watch, Joe Rogan or, all these other freaking podcasts are advocating keto diets and that fat isn't bad for you and that butter isn't bad for you and that animal fat does not cause cholesterol and stuff like that. And everyone is saying don't eat sugar. Sugar causes inflammation. Sugar does not cause inflammation. Insulin, an elevated amount of insulin causes inflammation in the human body. But the thing that causes that elevated amount of insulin is fat. So you're eating a high-fat diet because obviously you're American and you eat oil and you eat butter and you eat burgers and you eat meat. So automatically you have a high-fat diet and then you eat some sugar. And now you have high blood sugar. But it's not the sugar's fault. It's the fat's fault that's not allowing the sugar that is now in your blood to get into your muscles where it's supposed to be. It's kind of like, I'll give you an analogy. Imagine a bucket full of water, and then I drill some holes in the bottom of the bucket, and now the water is able to leave the bucket. Now, in this analogy, the bucket is like your veins, right, where the blood is traveling, or your arteries, where the blood travels. And the water is the sugar, right, inside of your arteries, traveling inside the blood. When I drill the holes, the sugar is allowed to escape. And so there's no problems. There is no high blood sugar. But now imagine this. Now imagine I have the holes in the bucket and I put butter in the holes and the holes are all clogged up. Now I pour water into the bucket and the bucket starts to overflow. Are you going to say that the reason that the bucket is overflowing is because of the water? Or is it because of the butter? What's causing the problem? It's the butter, and it's the same thing that's happening in our bodies, and we blame sugar for it when it's just not the truth. It's just not the truth. And because we're so afraid of sugar, it means we're lowering the amount of carbohydrates we're eating per day, and it's going to lower your quality of life. You're not going to feel as good when you're not eating sugar. You're just not going to feel as good. One of the things that really took me from 80% cured to 100% is sugar. Adding 15 tablespoons of sugar to my fruit smoothies. Let me give you an example. Here right now, I'm drinking my mango smoothie. So right in here is just mangoes, water, and sugar. That's it. And I don't eat oil, so I don't have a diabetes problem. I'll even give you another example. My sister was pre-diabetic, and then she went on the high-carb, low-fat vegan diet. After 6 months, she goes back to the doctor to get blood test, and she's no longer pre-diabetic. That's just another example. It's not the sugar, it's the fat. Cut the fat out, add sugar to your diet, and watch what happens to your DP and to your mental health. You will feel happier, you will feel calmer, and you will feel more in reality, more grounded. Go try it out. Sorry for this long rant. Let me know if you have any other questions in the comments. Hit the like button, subscribe to my stuff because I'm going to be making more videos. Comment on what you want to see. Peace out.